committee for inviting me here today. I'm not going to try and comment on all aspects of the bill in the time available to me, but will certainly answer questions on other parts. I do believe, though, that the various elements make good sense, and they constitute at least a beginning in terms of dealing with the mess our refugee determination system has been in for more than 2 decades. And these proposals didn't come out of the blue. They are designed to deal with very concrete and real problems. One provision of the legislation that should have been in place years ago is the one that will give the government authority to designate third countries, safe third countries of origin, and that will have an impact on the hundreds of Americans who claim refugee status every year in Canada, plus smaller numbers of Brits, Australians, and New Zealanders, and Swedes, and so on. It's high time, therefore, we put in place a system that reduces to a minimum the time and resources spent on such claims, bring our practices and policies in line with other countries. And I think the procedures in the Act for doing this reflect a good balance of qualitative and quantitative considerations. I also strongly support the measures in the legislation designed to deter human smuggling, and I think the importance of this can be seen in the recent experience of Australia in this regard. After a large number of boatloads of asylum seekers organized by human smugglers arrived in Australia in the late 1990s, early 2000, the government there introduced a policy under which such claims of such arrival would only be processed outside of Australia and not be allowed to arrive on Australian soil, where, as in Canada, even if their claims were turned down, they could delay their removal with an almost endless series of appeals and reviews that could go on for years. As a result of that policy, hardly any boats arrived for several years. In 2007, however, the Labour Party of Australia was elected to office. The new Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd, decided he was going to make Australia a kinder, gentler place, made it possible again for asylum seekers coming illegally in boats to be allowed in Australia. In consequence, 314 boats carrying asylum seekers have arrived in Australia since then. An estimate made last week by an Australian newspaper put the cost to Australian taxpayers of these arrivals $1.1 billion for the current financial year, $2.3 billion over the past 3 years. The opposition estimated it as $4.7 billion for the past 3 years, or about $250,000 on each asylum seeker. Our cost may be somewhat lower, but former Deputy Minister of Immigration and former Secretary of the Treasury Board, Jack Mannion, estimated before this committee in 2001 that the system was costing us altogether several $billion a year. By comparison, if we look at how much money we give to the UNHCR to take care of people in refugee camps, it comes to about $2 or $3 a year per person. There's a bit of a discrepancy. You ask why? Well, because there is not a powerful lobby pushing for the people in the camps. There is a powerful lobby that's been persistent and successful in pushing for generous treatment of claimants in Canada. So what we're proposing, what the government's proposing, makes good sense. However, there is one massive item that's lacking in the legislation. That's a robust system for designating safe third countries as distinct from safe countries of origin. What's a safe third country? Well, in the 1950s, when the United Nations Refugee Convention was drafted, Canada had no expectation of becoming a country of first asylum for any significant number of refugee claimants. We resettled 180,000 displaced people after World War II, and we took thousands of people after the Hungarian uprising, 1956, Czech in 1968, the Asian Ugandans in the early 70s, and Indo-Chinese people in the late 70s. And I had in-laws who were among the boat people, so I'm familiar with that problem. We never expected to become a country of first asylum because of our geographical location. We expected to be a country of resettlement. So to get here, the vast majority of refugee claimants have to travel through other countries, which are what are called safe third. Under generally accepted international rules, they should have sought asylum, and indeed they could have, and indeed should have sought asylum if their primary purpose was to reach safety. Many asylum seekers who'd already reached safety in countries such as the UK, France, France, and Germany, however, decided they would move on to make claims in Canada because of our more generous benefits. This practice is known as asylum shopping. We had a chance to bring this problem under control in the late 1980s when the legislation for the Immigration Refugee Board was being drafted. We had provision in that for establishing a list of safe third countries where people could have made claims, but there was a persistent lobbying by the refugee advocates to convince the then Minister of Immigration there wasn't another safe country in the whole world but Canada. And so instead of having a moderate number of people accessing the system that we could process thoroughly, we were deluged, and we've been deluged ever since. Right now, there's only one country that's been designated as safe third. That's the United States. Other countries have quite a long list of safe third countries. But unless we establish such a list, we are not going to be able to really manage the system properly. There are some issues involved in that. In the IRPA legislation, it said that we should, a consideration would be whether we have an agreement with another country, as we do with the United States. I don't think that legislation binds us, the way it's worded, to having such an agreement. We can consider such an agreement. If it does bind us, we can change the legislation. So, in conclusion, Chairman, I urge the government to put in place a comprehensive safe third country list as a matter of priority, and do whatever is needed to make it operational. In the meantime, Bill C-31 is a move in the right direction. Critics will claim that it constitutes a step backwards by Canada as a compassionate and welcoming country. I don't think this is the case at all. With its passage, we'll still be arguably the most generous country in the world in terms of our treatment of refugee claimants, while at the same time we'll have made major progress towards reassuring the Canadians that we have a fair and expeditious system that isn't open to widespread abuse. Thank you, Mr.